All right, Marcus Wood, Marcus Wood. I'm the offensive coordinator, associate head coach here at East Mississippi Community College.
How many years have you been here?
This is my I've been here 7 years, so this will be the start of my 8th.
So this is the fall of your
Yeah.
8th season.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are you from?
Starkville, right down the road, about an hour away, Starkville, Mississippi.
Okay. And your football background besides coaching?
Played here, ended up signing with a school out of here, ended up going to Georgetown, Kentucky, finished up playing, and then actually came back and coached here for a year, then did about 10 years of high school ball in Mississippi, then came back here.
Okay. So you have the reason you're here is you have a pretty rich background being around here.
Been good. Mm-hmm. Been a good deal.
And then what's your duties as offensive coordinator, assistant coach, maybe off the field, kind of how you work with the players and whatnot?
Yeah, we live here. I live here on campus, so I've lived here the last few years. Live right across the street from the dorm. So kind of a 24/7 deal. You're kind of around. I'm also, through the college, a weekend supervisor, so I stay here a lot on the weekends or rotate out with 4 other guys. And we try to maintain just a good, safe place for these guys to live and enjoy being around. As far as the actual coaching side of it, I'm in charge of everything offensively related. So game planning, all the prep stuff, all of the recruiting stuff, all the stuff that goes along with that. So yeah.
Okay. And then I guess what's your favorite part of the job?
Probably just being around the young people. I enjoy the kids. I have 3 sons of my own, and I'm a single dad. So to have those guys around my kids and get a chance to interact with them every day is pretty awesome.
Okay. How much does your kids gonna want to play football when they grow up?
Actually, my kids will probably end up being baseball players. They're smaller guys, and they'll probably end up playing baseball, and they're not as big as some of them. My oldest one I know a year or 2 ago, he's a sophomore that has been starting for a couple of years as a baseball player at his high school, and he told me, he said, "Dad, your linebackers are 230, 240. I'm 130, 140." So he said, probably not where my future is. So, pretty sharp, pretty well-rounded guys. So but they enjoy being around them. So that's awesome.
I'm telling them there's more money in baseball.
There you go. That's right. Less head injuries.
Yeah, exactly. That too. Can you just take me through kind of the offense you run and your philosophy as a coach?
Spread offense. Everything we do is up tempo. We work with basically 4 and 5 wide receivers most all the time. We don't really work tight ends. We have one package where we bring in an extra offensive lineman. Other than that, we stay in the spread. We call it about as fast. We run it about as fast as I can call it. So we're probably in the last few years averaging close to 85 to 90 plays a game. Yardage wise, we've been upper 500 yards, low 600 kind of in general on average. And then the same thing with points, averaging around 51, 52 a game. So been a really good run. We've had some really talented players, so it's been good.
Okay. And Clint was telling me just some of the rules that go along with junior college ball in Mississippi. And 55-man roster, 8 from out of state, 47 from in-state. You have 14 junior college teams. Throw in Division I and II around the area, and there's a lot of talent around Mississippi. Obviously, where does that come from?
I don't know. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but I think our guys that we recruit are probably as heavily recruited as anybody in the country because of the fact that with the junior colleges, you're dealing with 14 junior colleges that are offering these guys, basically paying for all their school, along with the Division I's, the Mississippi States, the Ole Miss, the Southern Miss, as well as your Division I AA's and Division II's that are in the state. So, they get recruited by a ton of people. The talent has always been, it's always been here. I know when I played here years back, I actually played here in the early 90s, and when I played here for a guy named Tom Good, we had, I think off the 2 years that I was here, I think I had 4 teammates that won Super Bowls. So it's always been a talent-rich state. We draw the 8 out-of-staters for our team, and generally speaking, those guys that are coming in are marquee guys when they get here. And so we go get blue chip guys that come in. So on top of the 47 that we'll have in-state, we'll catch 8 guys that are usually top-notch guys to go along with it. And then if you can get them and they gel the right way, a lot of times you'll have great success. And we've been fortunate to really get some guys who've gotten along good together.
And then does your offense kind of lean to, just more bigger programs, I guess, like Division I programs? Does it help guys transition to that?
I hope so. We have, in general, what we've got, I think in the last 7 years, we've averaged about 23, 24 signees a year, as many as 26, 27. And of those, anywhere from 16 to 18 BCS guys a year. So we've been able to put guys into big programs. I've got guys at Oklahoma, Ohio State, different places like that. In different conferences, we have a ton throughout the SEC. I know last year we had a couple guys that were at Alabama. 2 years ago, I think the D-line, 3 of the starting D-line with Florida were from our place. So, we've had a chance to really have some great talent that's come through, and then to watch them go on and then to continue to see them play. I think we've got 5 or 6 guys in the NFL now, so pretty unique. And as far as what we do offensively, lend into it, you'd like to think it does. We've had some, like I said, we've had some really good ones. I think we've got, some guys throughout the SEC at Texas A&M and different places that are offensive linemen as well. So, hope so.
Okay. And then I don't know how much Clint told you about just the project I'm doing, just the documentary and kind
a little, but he didn't go into great detail.
Okay, well, I mean, he's kind of the main piece of it just because of his story. But my whole aspect to do this is to get the word out that, athletes understand, coaches understand what's going on with a concussion injury. It's like any other one. People need to understand what's going on before they jump to conclusions. So I got a couple questions just about Clint coming, and then just some about concussions as well.
Absolutely.
Just first, how has Clint transitioned to the coaching world and being here?
Yeah, I think he's doing a fantastic job. He's a young guy with a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. Fits in. The rest of our staff's pretty energetic. So I think that part's really, really, really good as far as how he does that. The rapport that he has with the players, being a younger guy, I think he blends really well. He talks to them well. There's a great separation between player and coach. There's no problems with that. And I think he just does an outstanding job with what he brings to the table every day.
Okay, and then just how big of an asset is it to have someone who's been in a couple Division I programs and learned from some major coaching names?
I think it's huge. I think, generally speaking, from a staff standpoint, we've had a lot of great coaches. We've had several. I think we've had about 25 or 26 coaches in the last 7 years that have moved out of here into different levels, Division II, Division I AA, or FCS now, and then, of course, the FBS schools. I think he's a guy that will come in. He'll be here for a little while. We'll try and take as much from him as we can and apply it to what we do, and hopefully we benefit from it. And I know he is a guy that we think very highly of him. I think he's just a very sharp guy, and I think he's going to bring a ton to the table just from his experiences alone, like you mentioned, from playing in West Virginia under Coach Holgerson, from playing under Jimbo at Florida State. He's just been around a lot of good stuff, and then, of course, growing up with his dad coaching and his brothers coaching, I think he's just a natural asset for us.
And it kind of bounces off your playing days as well, but as a coach, and I'm sure he's going to learn this as he goes, but how much do those playing days help influence you and your style and the way you conduct yourself each day with the players?
Oh, I don't. You know what? I think everybody's different. Everybody's going to have their own style. Everybody's going to have their own twist. But I think a lot of it's fashioned from how their playing days went. Positions that you played, mentality that you may have had as a player. I think all that correlates to it. I think it goes into it. I think with him, like I said, growing up in the house of a coach, he understood the game. He looks at the game. He is a very mature young coach. He looks at the game different than probably a lot of coaches his age would, just from a standpoint of what he grew up with and how he was raised at home. So, I think there's no question. From my own standpoint, I think a lot of the stuff I have from a coaching standpoint is also directly related to my playing days, and I think his will be too. And he had such great experiences at college, so I think he's going to do a great job there.
I think you just talk about his future and his career with, like you said, he's got a rich kind of lineage with coaching through his family and just what you kind of see his future being like.
You know what? He's a guy that we think he's kind of a shining star. We think he's a bright guy that's on the rise, no question about it. For us, we want to try to surround ourselves with as much talent on the field as we can. Same situation from a coaching standpoint. We want to go get the best available coaches that we can, put them in a position to be successful, get them involved with the recruiting process. He does a great job with dealing with young people, like I said earlier. But I think that will spill over into his recruiting. He's been recruited at different programs. As far as his background and having been recruited at a couple different programs and gone through some different things at different levels, I think that's another asset that he'll bring to the table. He's a guy that we think is a bright shining star. Whether he's able to stay for very long or not, don't know. We're kind of a win now league with where we are, and we feel like he's a guy that can help us do that. So again, very excited about him being here.
Okay, and then just kind of transitioning to the injury aspect of it. I compare it when I've done my interviews. I compare it to just us stepping out of our house each day.
Mhm.
We don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
Just like you don't know what's going to happen in a football game.
Right.
So how much is it just going through a player to let them know that a huge major contact sport like football, that there are risks involved and that the players accept it and are willing to play?
I think most of them have that embedded in them when they're young, that they realize that it is a contact sport. It is a violent game by nature. It's not a touch tag game. I mean, it's a physical sport. It's a demanding sport. A lot of training that goes in that a lot of people never take into account, whether it's the running in the off season, whether it's the continual weightlifting throughout the season. And I think these guys are building their bodies up in such a way that they deliver such violent contact when they make contact. From our standpoint, I think by the time they get here, they already have a pretty good sense that it's a violent game. And I think most of the ones that are here, if you look at most junior colleges, you're dealing with a lot of small rural towns. And I think the guys that are coming here, we've got guys here that have come in from Tallahassee, guys have come in from New York, different things like that. And I think when they come here, there's obviously a love for it that you can't really comprehend unless you've done it or been around it. Maybe you have a love that you're passionate about with something else. And I think these guys are willing to risk whatever because it is such a vital part of their life. And I think with Clint, I think he's a great example of a guy who had great priorities, a guy that understood where he was. I know when his dealings with his concussions and things like that he went through, and I've talked to him briefly about some of that. Very passionate about the game, still very passionate about the game. Don't think he's lost any of that, which is what I think is going to make him a great coach. Not his background, not how he grew up, not that he was the son of a coach, but that he's very enthusiastic about being it. Well, same situation with players. I think our players in general, the guys that we can get that have that kind of zeal for the game, have made us really good in the last few years. I think they're all aware that it's violent. I think they're all aware it's a contact sport. And I think there are some risks involved, but I think at the same time there's a lot of passion that's involved with it too. So, I think it kind of balances that out.
And then as a coach, how much kind of rests on your shoulders when it comes down to the end of the day, just teaching these guys, the right way to play the game, the right way to tackle, the right way to catch the ball and not get hit, whatever it may be. How important is that for you?
Huge. I don't think you can overemphasize that. I think as a coach, from our standpoint, we talk to them about seeing what you hit, tackling with your eyes up, making sure you're making contact with your shoulders. We talk to them about a lot of things. We talk to them about using your hands. Of course, the game's so different than it was years and years ago. But as much as you talk about it, you'll still have some injuries. But it's like you mentioned earlier. You can get injured coming out of your house. I can slip getting off a curb. I can do a lot of things and cause a damage to myself as well. So I think for the guys that play it and the guys that truly love it, I think it's such a passion to them that I don't think there'll ever be anything that really deters them or turns them away from it.
Okay. And then just the best way to combat the risk of a concussion, I guess, is there ways to, the doctors I've talked with talk a lot about possible prevention, building up the neck, making your neck strong, your shoulders, etc. like that. Is that kind of maybe at the forefront of possible prevention of a concussion?
I think so. I think anything you can take from the medical staff, whether they're talking about doing, we've tried different helmets, we've done different things. We've put some guys that have had concussions in previous years in different helmets. We've gotten to the point now where just about all of them wear about as nice of equipment as we can get. And we've been fortunate enough here to have the money to be able to do that. Our president's been very supportive, and he's tried to make sure he's taking care of all of them the same way. But yes, I think from a strength and a training standpoint, from your training staff standpoint, your medical doctors that we use, I think you take into account everything they say, and you have to. It's a different game in that years ago you'd get a guy that would get his bell rung or his see stars or whatever comment that the coach used to make, like when I was playing, and you would continue to play and push through some things. And now I think we're pretty quick to try to get them off the field, make sure if they're having any type of head trauma that we get them diagnosed and kind of go from there. So it has changed a lot. I do think that the fact of tying in the conditioning to it, the strength, the neck, building up the neck, different muscles that the doctors have talked about, huge. I think the equipment is also huge. And then I think just the idea that you're telling them and they're aware of how they're supposed to tackle, what they're supposed to do when they contact, and how they're supposed to approach the game is hopefully emphasized everywhere.
And then do you think that the nature of concussions, you're dealing with the brain and the head, which are arguably the most vital part of the human body.
Right.
Compared to an ACL injury where you do some rehab and
Right.
you can get back on the court, field,
Right.
whatever it may be. Do you see just the nature of concussions in the area of the body that they deal with, maybe the reasoning as to the buildup of the kind of concussion avalanche, if you will?
I do. I think I think with that, the possibility of a catastrophic injury from a head injury, the possibility of a paralysis or something from a neck injury, I don't think there's any question. Anytime you start talking about neck, spine, head, I think that's a bigger deal than when people talk about an ankle or a knee or a shoulder. I've had both my shoulders repaired from back when I played. I had several concussions from when I was younger as a player, but the concussions were addressed way more than the shoulders or the knees or any of the other things. So I do. I think as far as injuries go, there's a taboo about that. You got to be careful when you deal with head injuries at all.
I mean, can you just take me through the communication process now? Maybe, if a player, like you said, if a player does get a concussion, try and get him off the field and keep him out until they're ready to play.
Right.
Can you just take me through that and maybe talk about how that process has enhanced over the years?
Yeah, I think years ago when you looked at concussions, when, like I said, if you had an injury and somebody claimed they had their bell rung or were seeing stars or any type of statement along those lines, they would diagnose the guy on the sideline if they felt like they could play, or maybe they'd give them X amount of time out and then put them back in. I can remember that from my playing days. I think now it's gotten to the point where, generally speaking, if there's an injury that's a head injury to one of our guys, first things first, our trainers are going to start diagnosing them. They'll end up removing their headgear or whatnot from the sideline if they don't remove them from the sideline. If they're allowing them to stay, they'll end up taking their headgear and putting it away. They don't want them getting back onto the field. With us, our trainers have certain benchmarks and things that they're trying to hit as far as time frame for getting them back. They're going to make sure they do all their concussion tests and they're going to evaluate them before we have an opportunity to put them back on the field. And so I think it has drastically changed in that sense. Years ago, I just don't think they probably knew as much about it from the medical field. And now I think they're very well versed in it, learning more every day. And it is dangerous and it is scary. And like I said, with the weight training, the things that the guys are doing now, they're bigger and stronger and faster than they've ever been. So we want to try to be on top of it and be proactive of any type of head injury that we come across.
Okay. And the conflict of my whole project is just players reporting the injury, because that's kind of something Clint talked to me about. How I think he said 3 of the 5 he never told anybody about.
Right.
How big is that to ensure safety and
Huge. I think it's huge. I think anytime you're and there's the one side that I don't know that you can really combat from a coach's standpoint. You got to have great rapport and relationships with your players. I mentioned Clint and his rapport with his players. I think he'll do a fantastic job with that. But at the same time, those same players I mentioned earlier, being passionate about the game, they're aware that if they let you know, that may cost them some playing time. And a lot of them are scared to death to come off the field, more so than the injury, which I think you have to do a good job talking to them and presenting it to them and making them understand there's more to life than just a game. There's a lot of things that you're trying to teach those young people. So, that's the tough part to me, is to make sure you get guys that are, I guess, not just aware of the dangers of the head injuries, but the idea that they need to make sure they're being upfront and honest with the trainers. They need to make sure they're talking to their position coaches or their coordinators and trying to address all that. So that I don't know the answer to trying to make sure all of them talk to or communicate to the coaches or to the trainers as well. You would hope that the players would all do that, but in reality, you're aware of the fact that those guys want to play, and it's very important to them, and they are very passionate about it. So I think that's the area that's tough.
And then a lot kind of a follow up to that, just the mentality, Clint.
You want to wait on that, or?
I'll ask the question, then we can wait on it.
Okay, go ahead.
But just the mentality of a lot of players, like from my interview with Clint, he's a very headstrong individual. He's very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
He badly wants to. He badly wanted to be in there to help his team win and
Right.
to ensure that he did what he did, because as a quarterback he viewed himself as a leader.
Right.
How much goes into a player's just mentality and maybe reporting an injury or that kind of thing? How much is just the mentality of an individual and their competitive spirit really the driving force that kind of drives them as compared to thinking about anything else?
You know what? I think the competitive nature of the guys that you coach, and the more successful you are as a team, a lot of times depends on those guys being competitive, and they do want to compete every day. And most of the guys that we try to recruit, most of the guys that you want to coach, are guys that they want to win at everything they do. So the idea of them pulling themselves out or informing a coach of an injury, it is a deal that they've got. It's a hurdle for them. I mean, they've got to decide, hey, I'm going to do this or I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to try to play through this or not play through that. And I think a lot of them are instilled when they are young, minor injuries. Let's say it's an ankle sprain or something like that. They're kind of taught to play through it, try to push through it as much as you can. And I think there are some things that aren't understood about brain injuries and things of that nature. And I think some of the guys, as they go through them, again, they've got to develop a rapport with their coaches and with their trainers and be able to talk about that. How to teach them to do that, I think it's just kind of got to be a trust factor over time, and I think they've got to feel good about being able to talk to you, and I think they got to genuinely know you care about them and that you have their interest at heart, because I think you're right. When you mention Clint, you're talking about a guy that was in a leadership role, that his teammates did rely on him. He doesn't want to let them down. He wants to lead them. He wants to win those games. He wants to do the things that he can. And I'm sure there's tons of guys that have head injuries every year that never report them. I don't know the answer to how do you get that to the point where they confide in their trainer or talk to their coaches and let them all know. I don't know how you motivate them to do that other than just try and teach them about the injuries and or the seriousness or the after effects that can come with it. Outside of that, you want those guys that want to be out there on that grass. You want those guys that want to push the envelope and play and be as good as you can, as good as they can. But it's just a fine line. Like I said, being a dad with 3 sons, I mean, I'm aware of sports injuries and what they go through and how they do things. And you want your children to want to be competitive. You want them to want to do things, and I want mine to. But I want them to be upfront and honest. If there's something wrong, I want to know. And I think that's just something you build with your players, with your rapport. From our standpoint, it's kind of tough because you got them for about 18 months. So we have our guys here for about 18 months, and we know them for about 2 years, but 5 or 6 months, that's during the recruiting process. So we want to try to get as close to them as we can and make sure they understand that we do care about them. And we're real hopeful. I know our head coach mentions all the time that the greatest recruiters we have are our past players. We want our past players to make sure our current players know that we do care about them and want them to do the right thing as far as their body and taking care of it. I wish I had a great answer as far as, getting those guys to report stuff or getting them to tell stuff to the trainers. I think it's like you mentioned. You get guys like Clint that want to win, that want to lead their team, they want to do things, they want to do great stuff, and they don't want to come out.
Now, take me back a little just to your playing days. What was the education on? You said you had a couple yourself. What was the education like back then with concussions?
Back when I played it was when they held us out, they would hold us out for a brief time. I had several concussions. I was a defensive back when I played. And back in those days, probably the difference that wasn't taught like it is now, we were taught more to use our head, to run through your opponent, as opposed to now they teach so much more with the shoulder. Now I'm an offensive guy, so ours will use their heads in the blocking side of it, or that aspect of it, but it's usually after their hands have been thrown, and we're trying to extend our arms and do that, as opposed to just button it up like you used to. Back in those days, if you had an injury, they might hold you out for a day or two, and then you were right back in the mix. I had one that was a significant one when I was playing junior college ball, where I, lost my memory for a day or two and just didn't recall. I played in a game that I couldn't tell you about. My old roommate laughs around, jokes with me every now and then about that. But I think you get into those type of deals. Whereas now, I think it's they do such a good job diagnosing it as opposed to those days. Back in those days, we didn't have a full-time training staff here. Now we do. We have 2 full-time trainers as well as several student trainers. We didn't have that. We had a student trainer that helped. If we had a big injury, they would take us to Starkville up to Mississippi State, or they'd take us down to Meridian, go to the doctor's office down there. And now, you've got guys here on staff that do that. So vastly different in the time when I played. Just I don't think they were as aware. And I think a lot of the stuff with the NFL guys and all has brought a lot of that to light. And I think they've tried to change a lot of that.
And then you mentioned they were addressed right away when you got them.
Yeah, with head injuries. Yeah, well, like I said, they might take us out if they felt like we had gotten a little ding or weren't right. They would pull us out. If they would ask us questions and we didn't know the answer to the questions, they might hold us out for a couple of days. But it usually wasn't much longer than that. It was usually a fairly quick get back in there. And again, I don't say that with any animosity towards any of my old coaches. I think they had our best interest. This wasn't really a situation where they had a lot of help medically to know what was what. And those guys really tried to take care of us too, and I'm aware of that. But at the same time, as a player, I wanted to play. And if you want to play, I mean, you'll run through walls to try to do it. And I think that's the problem. You got such a overwhelming desire from these guys to be competitive and be on that grass, and then anything that holds them back, they don't really want to hear it. And at that age too, I think that's the difference too. At the 18 to 22, 23 years of age, I don't think I think they feel invincible. As they get older, they might realize that, hey, maybe I shouldn't have done this or shouldn't have done that, but it's usually after the fact.
Okay. Now this is kind of just a two-part question. Have you ever had any impacts from them related to concussions down the line?
A few things, nothing major. I mean, I've had some headaches, things of that nature, different deals that you might deal with. I don't know if it's directly related to that. I've had some stuff with some vision issues on some things that were called bleeders or floaters in your eyes, which were busted blood vessels and things of that nature. But I don't think it's I may have some other things from it or may not. I don't know. I don't really want to say this is directly caused from that, because I don't know if that was what's caused any different deals. But no, I'm pretty fortunate. I didn't have as many as probably a lot of people. I know Clint went through a lot of different things that he had to endure, but probably a lot more than I did.
And then probably the biggest point I've heard just from anybody I've ever talked to for this project is just the doctor at Michigan talked about how there's so many people that make such a big deal of concussions, but millions of people die and are threatened with their lives with obesity and we'll call it not being active, and that's something that we don't pay attention to. How big is just staying active? As a coach, you're always active. You're always working with players. You're in the weight room. How big is that maybe to even pushing anything of an injury that you might have had in the past even away?
I don't think there's any question. Being physically fit, doing things, trying to be active as a coach, trying to be active as a regular person that's living his normal life. I don't think there's any doubt that there's huge benefits down the road as far as anything correlating to any head injuries. Tell me again what you're asking there. What do you?
Do you think they're just? It kind of keeps you mentally sharp. And just
I hope so. I hope working out, I hope doing things keeps us active. I hope it keeps us not only active, but keeps us sharp mentally and focused. I look back at my playing days and how I trained at the time, and then as opposed to what I do now. And now my hips or knees aren't as good as they were when I was younger. But yeah, we are still active. We try to do things. From my kids' standpoint, I want them to be as active as they can be. I do think that's going to help, in no question, in anything you do in life.